We left off in our last conversation. We were talking about the skyscrapers and Raoul's
So we're about in 79.
late 70s.
78,
Skyscrapers,
79.
Raoul's, and the Continental Club, and kind of how Raoul's and the Continental Club fed into Armadillo World headquarters, and then you opening up with or for the Ramones and the Clash and all that. So this was late 70s, like you said, and going from the Skyscrapers, and you also had the offshoot of the Skyscrapers, the Shapes.
The Shades.
Excuse me. And so how long were the Skyscrapers a thing?
I'm going to loosely say 6 months.
Relatively quick.
6 months was about the lifespan. It was action-packed. There was a lot going on in those 6 months. But the most significant part about that whole excursion for me was just my partnership with Chris Bailey, the guitarist.
Okay.
And this was really where I went into the deep end of the pool with songwriting on my own. Because I found a collaborator that was very generous. I'm not a guitarist, never have been a guitarist. But as a drummer, I always had a really good sensibility about arrangement. And so because I did have, what I call musical instincts from my musical training in classical music, et cetera, and so forth, it was fairly easy psychologically for me to make the leap into just, say, composing what I call sketches of arrangements, which is the idea. I think the thing that made it accessible to me was because I had grown accustomed to the idea of just capturing riffs.
Put them in the back of your head.
Yeah, my point being is that from a rhythmic standpoint, I used to theoretically imagine putting together different types of bass structures. Even if I was practicing drums, I'd be thinking about like bass movements.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Because I used to play bassoon.
So I
used to think in terms of just big, broad, thick chords.
Yeah.
Right. And because the music that I liked was always kind of riff heavy, like you heard like the Humble Pie stuff, the Live at the Fillmore. You know how riffy all that stuff is?
Yeah.
That Tour de Force, they did a version of I Don't Need No Doctor by Muddy Waters. It's a Muddy Waters song, right? From Chess Records.
Traditional blues, R&B music.
It was a jump blues. I don't need no doctor. Yeah. It was just right? And there's like, it's like a sledgehammer. And you just go all the way back to the germ of like 3-piece presentations. So you're looking at what Cream was doing. You're looking at what The Who were doing. And obviously when the Jimi Hendrix Experience came out, it was like a nexus.
Yeah.
Right? Because Jimi was thinking on what I consider to be like a more symphonic level.
Yeah.
Right? Although it's a 3-piece presentation, but he's thinking about symphonies. And that was one of the reasons he used volume so aggressively was just for the harmonics and the overtones and how much impact that it had on the audience, just a visceral assault of sonic force. It's hard to describe it if you haven't heard it.
Yeah.
But I use the analogy like when I first saw ZZ Top and Trapeze when I was still in high school. It was like a physical type of assault to hear that much sound coming at you. Right. It's not coming from a monaural, speaker or something like that. Right?
It is hitting you in the face.
This is a sound that felt like a gush of wind hitting you, right? So I say all that to say, by 78, 79, I had digested so much heavy music, so much heavy rock. And what was happening in the zeitgeist was you're just starting to see the vestiges or the beginning of the so-called punk wave, right? Which was totally minimalist by comparison, right? Now, it was easy for me to relate to the Ramones because the Ramones came off with such a metallic type of presentation, right? Their sound was very metallic.
Yeah.
Right?
I hear you.
Although it was really, revved up, and it was so concise and economized. And those songs being such short songs, because most of their songs are like under 2 minutes, let alone 3 minutes.
Right.
Right? Because it was just literally, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, I'm out. You know what I'm saying? With this real intense sonic assault. So when we played opening for the Ramones, I was really taken aback at just how powerful, their live presentation was. Because by contrast, I'd seen a lot of the quote unquote punk bands at Raoul's, and that sound was very, let's just say, sophomoric. You know what I mean? Because nobody's really got gear.
They don't have
the majority of the punk wave in Austin were really like what I call young novice musicians. And I just happened to kind of fall into the cliques because I understood the music and I didn't have like a cynical attitude about what they were doing. I understood what they were doing because I understood what the kids in London were doing. You know what I'm saying? And
from a cultural perspective.
And the interesting thing about it is when you hear, for all the talk about, DIY, this, that, and the other thing, those early records by like The Damned, which was kind of like the first impactful punk rock band. The Damned were like happening before the Sex Pistols. They kicked the door open. And then shortly thereafter, the Sex Pistols, came through with their singles, with God Save the Queen. And that was the thing, as the Sex Pistols really started to catch fire because of all the notoriety and the controversy. You got to once again understand the Sex Pistols were driven by Malcolm McLaren, the manager of the Sex Pistols, was the reason that the Sex Pistols even existed in the first place. He was a shop owner, he had Vivian Westwood, the fashion designer.
Okay, I'm not familiar. But
Vivian Westwood was the famous fashion designer. She's passed away now, but she's literally the one that's credited with she was like the architect of the punk rock style.
Oh, okay.
The first person, she used to sell clothes that were like ripped up and then reconstructed with safety pins.
Oh, all right, yeah.
Zippers and
the studs,
and odd spaces, and all the bondage type gear. Those were her inventions.
Interesting.
She used to have a boutique called Sex, was the name of the boutique. It's a really fascinating story. But see, she and Malcolm were like partners in that shop.
Okay.
And Malcolm knew that there was like a buzz in the zeitgeist because London was going through an economic crisis at that point in time. So people were edgy, pissed off, broke, and the kids were not playing. They were really, really pissed off. And that's why when you do listen, if you sit down and listen, and now that you could like pull up like iTunes and actually get the lyrics in front of you from that debut Sex Pistols album, you realize Johnny Rotten was like a lyrical mastermind. He was brilliant. All of that angst and dissatisfaction, he was very, very clever and articulate about it. But the thing was, the production of that record was masterful. Like the Ramones debut album. That Sex Pistols debut album is flawless. It's a perfect piece of rock and roll. Top down, like all killer, no filler. It was so economically arranged, right? There's no fluff in it. So see, their whole thing was like no guitar solos. We're sick of Pink Floyd. We're sick of Genesis. We have no relationship to the Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin, these artists driving around in limousines, living in castles, and we're down here in the shit. We hate those people. I mean, that was their sentiment, right? Mm-hmm. So they drew a line in the sand.
Yeah.
You either with us or you with them. When the Rolling Stones released the album Some Girls, Mick Jagger had been listening to punk rock. He had been listening to The Clash. He'd been listening to Sex Pistols, right? And that's why that record has like a real quick, edgy. It's got less of a bluesy,
Right.
R&B feel. It's got more of a edgy rock and roll, punky kind of a feel because Mick has always had that sort of antenna.
I see.
Right. His genius is being in sync with the church of what's happening now.
Yeah.
And that's how they've always progressed through every type of, trend and permutation in pop music as things get advanced. They would just lay back because they had gotten to that point to where they're only going to release an album maybe every 3 years. Right. And in the meantime, he's doing things in the world, right? He's traveling. He's back and forth between London and New York, London and New York, London and New York, LA, Paris, hanging out, soaking it up, soaking things up, soaking musical influences up. But that's the Stones. You see what I'm saying? Because he had the wherewithal and the financial wherewithal to do these things.
Yeah.
Johnny Rotten can't do all these things. He's not doing any of these things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, you barely eat.
He's trying to make it from Tuesday to Wednesday. Yeah. So my point is the urgency of that record is palpable. So not to drone on and on and on about it, but the thing was because Malcolm McLaren had the same type of sensibility as a Brian Epstein or an Andrew Loog Oldham, who was the Stones manager.
Okay.
See, the Andrew Loog Oldham was like a provocateur. He would put the Stones in situations knowing that it was going to create press. So there was a famous story where they were on tour someplace and Bill Wyman had to piss and they pulled off and went on the side of a gas station or whatever to take a leak.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow the police got involved in that. You know what I'm saying? And this was like a no-no. Like you can't do this. We're talking 1964.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You can't even say the word piss.
Yeah. Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, right?
Right.
But the controversy becomes Stones urinating in the street, this, that, and the other thing. Here comes the cops. And it's excitement.
PR.
How dare they? Who do they think they are?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then their manager got on this whole thing where he created a basically just like a blog, what we'd consider a blog today. Would you let your daughter marry a Rolling Stone?
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it's the adverse of the Beatles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every girl wanted to marry a Beatle.
Yeah, they were high and tight.
Right. But would you let your daughter marry a Rolling Stone? Because everybody's looking at the Rolling Stones like they're just, syphilis. Right? They didn't know what to think.
Yeah.
Right?
Damn.
So that was punk rock right there. That was like considered punk right there. Just the antithesis of whatever the mainstream found accessible.
Against the grain. Whatever.
You feel me?
Yep.
So what I'm saying was we fast forward to 70, 78, 79. Malcolm McLaren is on the same wavelength. He's putting the Sex Pistols in positions to create controversy, right? So they went on a TV show, let's just say that was kind of like the equivalent of like the Tonight Show, right? It was like a talk show type scenario.
Right.
And of course, the host was kind of snide and he wanted to kind of, poke jabs. You have to understand that the way that Johnny Rotten carried himself in public, right? He's the kind of guy that always had something slick to say, like, what are you looking at? And what makes you think you're so much better than me? Like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You dig what I'm saying? Like a chip on his shoulder. Yeah, I can't overstate how exciting it was that summer when all of that erupted. See, because they had a record deal with EMI Records. And then the controversy became so much fervor that EMI dropped them, had to pay them the full bulk of their, contract for the release, right?
Yeah.
That's why there's a song on their debut album called EMI. Because EMI got cold feet because the band was just too controversial. But they got paid anyway.
Yeah.
Like big time. You dig what I mean?
Shit.
So
Get on them.
Yeah. But the short story was that was just as controversial as when the glam rock thing happened almost 10 years earlier, right? In 1970, 71, 72, right? Everybody was up in arms about this new breed of kids that really just hate everything. Their song was "Anarchy" in the UK. So what happened was the vanguard of that movement, the Damned, booked a tour with the Sex Pistols and the Clash and Susie and the Banshees and X-Ray Specs. You know what I'm saying? There was like a litany, and a band from America called the Heartbreakers, which was Johnny Thunders from the New York Dolls that you heard me talking about. Because see, that was the thing. Like there was a nexus in that gap between like the New York Dolls once they separated in 1964. Before the CBGB's thing exploded, Johnny Thunder started a group called the Heartbreakers with Richard Hell and Jerry Nolan, the drummer from the Heartbreakers. And then Richard Hell split off and started this band called the Voidoids, which was one of the first American punk rock bands alongside like the Dead Boys out of Cleveland. There's actually a documentary about that whole movement, that downtown New York punk scene that was happening before there was a British punk scene. See, punk started in New York. It didn't start in London. They didn't start calling it punk in London until after they started calling it punk in New York.
Interesting.
Yeah, there was a magazine called Punk. Because I told you New York had this underground scene that New York Dolls were like the king of this underground scene. There was this whole glam scene going on simultaneous to the New York Dolls. You had like Wayne County. And if you're in the flow of all of these shenanigans and these movements, right? And then you understand that, the West Coast has got things going on, and you got the Nuns, and then you got like the Cramps, and you got like all these, pockets of punk rock just already percolating in the United States. It just hasn't formulated into a cohesive thing yet, right?
When you start out at the top, there's nothing left to do but try. Best you can do is slow the fall. With parachutes so dying nice, it's time slows to wake fall.
Back to Austin. As I told you before, by the time that Raoul's, started to cater to like the so-called local punk rock scene, this whole little community had kind of sprouted up in the aftermath of the Sex Pistols coming through Texas. Because I told you they played a show in Dallas,
right?
San Antonio, and then shortly thereafter, like Mushroom Spores, these punk rock bands from everywhere, from West Texas, from Amarillo, started to migrate to Austin because something was going on. Something was in the water. Something was in the zeitgeist. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to just conservatively say I was probably 5 years older than the average musician that was in that first wave of the Raoul scene. Chris Bailey was in this group called the Body Snatchers. So Chris caught my attention just because he had such a sharp, dynamic playing style, because his chord structures were just so tight and powerful and punchy, But he was also a very fluid and very evocative, like lead guitar player. And the whole idea was that's the point. It's like punk rock, you couldn't play lead. None of that stuff that was popular in the 70s it was all considered passé.
I see.
You dig what I mean?
Yeah.
It wasn't hip to do that. You dig what I'm saying? And just because there were all these little caveats, I couldn't buy in 100%. You dig what I mean? Because to me, it just didn't make any sense. If like, why, like you guys are anarchists, right? So why are you making rules?
Exactly. How come I can't play this music the way I want to play it?
I mean, it was kind of hypocritical.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Makes sense.
To me. But the fact that I could play drums and because I could really play drums. You know what I'm saying? I was getting a lot of overtures to play with these bands that were less sophisticated. And it kind of put me in the scene like in a genuine way, as opposed to just being like a tourist or a mercenary
Yeah,
or something like that.
I got you.
And I got to know the people and I got to know the artists and everything like that. And then we did a thing where we did some little mini tours around Texas as a group of Austin bands going to Corpus Christi or Galveston or San Antonio.
Yeah.
Like we were taking our little cult show
Your units
on the road.
Yeah.
In Texas. Having said that, me especially having gone through all of the rigor of being in a glam rock community and having withstood the scrutiny of the general populace and people calling you names driving by in cars because they can't stand what you're representing, right? I was already built for that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. You'd gone through that in life.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, it's nothing. They hate you. That's
You're doing
great.
something right.
Keep doing it.
Yeah. Feel that.
Get more safety pins and rip up more jeans. Anyway, I guess what I'm trying to do is bridge the gap. When we started the Skyscrapers, we had every intention of just kind of like hitting this new wave vector, because now you had, like, punk was kind of like the thing that was a new zeitgeist. And then on the back end of that, you started to hear about new wave. And what that was where a lot of the British bands had started to incorporate synthesizers into their sound. But the songs were just like super pop, like very well constructed, anthemic, you know, almost like football songs. You know what I mean? So that was like on the back end of the first wave of the punk movement. And that's where it became a bit more experimental, and you start to see things like, that's where like Duran Duran, it evolved into this whole movement that they started called like the New Romantic movement. So when you had like Duran Duran, you had these bands like Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, you know, Joy Division, you know.
I see.
You started to see a whole new wave of artists that were using synthesizers profusely instead of just guitars. And they were singing instead of just screaming. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And it was becoming more about the production and this, that, and the other thing. So let's flip back stateside. Then what you had was the appearance of the Cars, which was a big thing. When the Cars showed up, like that debut Cars album, you know, She's My Best Friend's Girl, or, you know, You're All I've Got Tonight, or whatever. In other words, they were just like a hit-making machine with this really huge, great, progressive, quote-unquote, quasi-futuristic sound, right? This is like before Duran Duran peaked. The Cars were like a thing in the United States. And it kind of was a head turner.
Yeah.
Right? For me, stylistically, because the band like looked really sharp. They had just a great modern look. You know what I mean? And then, of course, they had this kind of interesting juxtaposition between like the synth technology and guitar technology. And they just were proficient across the board. But the sound of that debut album was really significantly better than almost everything else that was out. Production-wise, it was just, like, it was a sea change. And that's what the Skyscrapers were pointing towards. You see what I'm saying? So we were I personally think that we were heavily influenced by the success of the Cars as a direction.
The new wave.
And that's what made sense to me and Chris, because it was so much more musical. It was muscular and it was musical. So as things were moving along and we started to develop a following, Chris and I just fell into a groove. And what I mean by that is we just were essentially almost inseparable for the subsequent months. We were just, all of our spare time was just he and I sequestered in a rehearsal space like the White Stripes, guitar and drums.
Yep. Just
and he
figured it out.
he just had like a consistent flow of ideas. He was never bereft of song ideas. And it just inspired me to try new song ideas. And he never rejected any of my suggestions. So it was like a safe space for me to cultivate my legs as a songwriter, right?
Okay.
And he appreciated my voice, and I appreciated his voice because he was a good singer, a really good singer. And we just had this simpatico type of thing. And what happened was my buddy, Jimi Siraj, who was also in the Skyscrapers, I think he got intimidated by the fact that Chris and I had bonded as a songwriting team.
I see.
Where Jimi and I never really got that same degree of chemistry because my taste was always so much, I'm just saying this with all due respect, my taste was a lot more eclectic than Jimi's.
I see.
But it wasn't as eclectic as Chris's. So Chris was always pushing me into further territory, uncharted territory. Like Chris turned me on to Devo. Devo's first single in the Zeitgeist was they did a reinvention of I Can't Get No Satisfaction by the Stones. You ever heard it?
Well, I've heard I Can't Get
No Satisfaction,
but
the
not
Devo
the Devo version. No.
Write it down. You know, it's one of those like double take things like, what? What is that? Right? It's like if you can imagine I Can't Get No Satisfaction, but the rhythm section is like a windshield wiper.
What a comparison.
Yeah. When you hear it, you'll understand why I said that.
All right.
Right?
Yeah.
We both like one of the most eclectic and wild experimental artists of all time, which is a guy named Captain Beefheart, Don Van Vliet. He was an associate of Frank Zappa, but he was just like an avant-garde with capital A. Like almost nobody understood what the hell Captain Beefheart was doing.
Captain Beefheart probably didn't understand what he was doing.
He did understand what he was doing because he's a genius. Like,
yeah, I got you.
You dig what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But he was so far afield from us mere mortals.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we were just fascinated because it was like that thing when you literally find like a UFO, what are you really gonna do? I'm not gonna run.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. If it's gonna disintegrate me, then you just gotta take me. I'll sacrifice myself to be in the presence of a UFO. Right? If that's in the cards, if that's the cost of me discovering the unknown, I'll pay the penalty.
Interesting.
Right?
That was your mentality.
But Chris was that sort of adventurous listener.
Okay.
You feel me? And he had such a broad, vocabulary as a guitarist. Chris had been in New York City or Los Angeles. I think he would have had a much more lucrative career. But being here, Austin was not a mecca of recording like, Nashville or, Hollywood or New York City or London. So you couldn't really make a living as a session person here. You could do sessions because I did a lot of sessions, but they were just what I call just kind of nickel and dime type things, So that wasn't like your staple. What I'm saying was that Chris was an extraordinary musician. He was not just your run of the mill good guitar player because Austin was just littered with good guitar players. Couldn't walk 10 yards without tripping over a good guitar player in Austin, Texas. So when the punk thing came up, it really drew another line in the sand, right? Now here's the irony of that. While all that's going on, like my daily running buddies are like the Fabulous Thunderbirds. So yeah, I'm cool with all these punk kids, but I've been cool with Jimi, Vaughan, and Stevie, Mike Buck, Ken Wilson, all these. I've been cool with these guys for 5 years. And they're just now starting to see some kind of daylight, right? Because you got to remember the T-Birds had a record deal way before Stevie ever got one.
Right.
And the T-Birds were already starting to tour Europe and all these places. But stateside, they were still kind of under the radar. They hadn't broken like with Tough Enough or any of that stuff that came in the 80s.
Was it because they were based out of Austin, you think?
I just think because they were with a small label. I mean, Tacoma was the label that broke them.
Was Tacoma out of Austin?
No, I think they were out. So Tacoma, if I'm not mistaken, was out of California.
Okay.
But I don't want to get into the weeds of that.
That's
what I'm just saying was they were kind of like, I'll put it this way. They were kind of classified as like a roots music
Mm.
type thing.
Interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like before they started calling it Americana,
Right.
right?
That was the T-Birds.
Yeah, because you had a few acts that were doing really well out of Austin, like Joe Ely, but Joe had never really got to crested that level of like the cover of Rolling Stone
Mhm.
because he didn't have a hit single, like a national #1 record or even a top 10 record for that matter. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It was still the radio game. Radio was still king in those days.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So all I'm saying was it certainly wasn't about the talent or the performances, right? Because he was always a heavy draw. You know, he could draw 1,000 people any venue, anytime, any day of the week, no sweat.
Yeah.
All throughout the Southwest, but particularly in Texas, he was like a big deal. And that was one of my running buddies. You know what I'm saying? And I guess I'm only saying that. I'm not saying that to name drop.
No, it's
I'm saying that to show that game recognizes game, right? Like musicians, just because that's your brand or that's your cup of tea doesn't mean that I don't see the brilliance or the beauty in what you're doing.
so if, you weren't playing necessarily Joe's music or the T-Birds music, so why do you think you were able to become such good buddies with these guys?
Because they saw my show.
I see. Game recognizes game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was just the fact that good music is good music.
Yeah. Sure.
You understand what I mean?
Absolutely.
And of course, there's always that little bit of pissing contest among artists. Where,
yeah, you're sharing this. I mean, you're fighting for prime time, whatever venue we're
Oh,
at.
bro. Well, yeah, it's like that, right? But I mean, the other side of that coin was, I'm just saying, when somebody is presenting a legitimate, solid performance,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to throw shade at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Regardless of what it is. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I'm just telling you that the common denominator was that we all like to party and we were all kind of partying together in one capacity or another
Mm-hmm.
and just basking in each other's glow, so to speak, I mean, because the T-Birds and Stevie Ray all used to play like at the Rome Inn at 29th and Guadalupe, and it was like a Monday night thing where it was just what I call a clique of people. It was not like lines around the block, a big deal to get in or a heavy cover charge or none of that stuff, right? It was just like, if you know, you know, and this is where it's at. And then you'd look up and Billy Gibbons would be sitting in the corner, with a couple of girls just chilling, what I mean?
It was just
he had driven up from Houston just to see the T-Birds. This was literally like the club C-Boys.
Mm-hmm.
This is when C-Boys used to run the Rome Inn. Like
Mm.
C-Boy was a real guy.
Right.
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 And
He used to run the Roman.
he used to manage the Rome Inn. That was his venue.
Okay. I knew there was a connection there. I wasn't sure if he had just worked there or.
Yeah, he taught Steve Wertheimer a lot of the club business.
Got it.
And that's why years later, when he got that venue, he made an homage to C-Boy.
Yeah. Okay.
Because he's like, this guy's the guy who showed me the game.
That's my favorite. One of my favorite
See,
venues.
back from that era, that's like CJ Stubblefield. We call him Stubbs, right? Like
Mhm.
Stubbs Barbecue. I knew the real Stubbs, like the guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
from Lubbock. Yeah, because a lot of the Austin bands got their kickstart in Lubbock playing at Stubbs. So the T-Birds did that. Joe Ely did. Joe Ely is from Lubbock, right? Like that's where he got his bones.
Okay, I didn't know that. All right.
He's from Lubbock, and but I'm just saying, the whole thing was started out with such humble beginnings.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Nobody's thinking about anything like it is.
Yeah, there was no marquee. You're just all hanging out together, playing, like you said, and just.
Yeah. And like I told you, I mean, we knew Clifford Antone before he ever decided to start the club. You know what I'm saying? And he's just a blues fanatic that liked to play bass. He liked to hang out with the musicians.
Okay.
And everybody got in his ear often enough to be like, man, you should start a club. because he was going to open a grocery store for his family.
Okay.
Right? The seed money that his family from I guess they're from, I'm going to say Baton Rouge or Shreveport.
Yeah.
Somewhere down there in the Golden Triangle, They had a delicatessen at 15th and Lavaca.
Okay.
And Clifford, was the manager of that,
And so
he had gotten the blues bug, I guess he had it all his life, to be honest with you. But by the time he got to the point of being an entrepreneur, his family had trusted him, to kind of extend their local business here in Austin and open up a bigger grocery store or something. So he had some seed money available. Gotcha. And, I think it was just a matter of time before people like Jimi Vaughan kind of just got in his ear like, bro, you could start a club. Because there was nothing on 6th Street during that time. 6th Street was flat. Nothing but little dusty, decrepit department stores held over from the 60s.
Yeah.
A couple of drugstores, you know what I'm saying? And a smattering of like what we call Mexican cantinas, that were considered rough spots, right? The way it was kind of shaping up was at that time, like I said, Armadillo was like the big thing.
Yeah, that was where the touring acts came. And yeah.
Armadillo was the big thing. And then the popular spinoffs would have been like Soap Creek Saloon was one that was real popular. Of course, the Continental Club.
Yeah.
Raoul's. And eventually, as you moved a little further into the 80s, then Steamboat on 6th Street sprang up.
Right.
But there were so many clubs that were like open, close,
sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like
there's a revolving door.
Places like the Lamplight. I used to play at this place called Flight 505.
Never heard of it.
Over on 5th Street,
Okay.
A lot of little places, you know what I'm saying? Saxon Pub was always around,
Okay.
But that never did really cater to anything edgy, like what we were into.
What you were trying to do, yeah.
So, but it was just an interesting thing because when you think about it, right, it's like, how many scenes are you going to have where punk rock and blues music are just cross-pollinating simultaneously with, country and western in the periphery.
Yeah.
Or what we call, cosmic cowboy.
Yeah.
The cosmic cowboy movement was percolating. But then the next thing to kind of move the story forward was when this club called Clubfoot opened up. That's when I shifted gears personally. Because Clubfoot was in a large venue right off of Congress Avenue between 3rd and 4th Street on the east side of Congress Avenue. In the 80s, there used to be like a Continental Trailways bus station like downtown. And just adjacent to this bus station was this big kind of warehouse-looking building, that this man named Brad First commandeered. And he and his partners, they named this venue Clubfoot. Well, Clubfoot became like a mecca of new wave /punk/funk. Because they had such an eclectic booking policy. It was like you could see it was literally, what was exciting about it was, apart from Armadillo, it was the place where you could see really the church of what's happening now.
I see.
So the example would be like one of the first British punk bands that came stateside was this group called the Stranglers. That was literally the first punk rock record that was labeled punk rock that I listened to. It was this group called the Stranglers, and they played at Clubfoot. And that was like a big deal because all the punks were there. And this was a good sized venue. Like you could get, I think, 700 people But it was literally outfitted to be like I don't want to use the word a competitor, but it was a professional quality venue.
Right.
Where the lighting rig, the sound rig,
yeah, all that
was like at that time considered pretty much state of the art.
Gotcha.
And I'm not exaggerating. So, you know, this is where I first started to see acts like REM used to come and play Clubfoot when they were like a new thing.
Yeah.
I saw Grace Jones at Clubfoot. I saw James Brown at Clubfoot.
God. What year was that?
I'm telling you, 1979, 1980.
God, this is just within a 2 to 3 to 4 year period of everything happening.
And so what wound up happening with that understanding in mind, right? By the tail end of 79, Chris and I had a repertoire of unrecorded material that was far exceeding what we were playing on stage with the Skyscrapers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I basically made a decision that I wanted to, you know, shift and become a lead singer.
Okay.
Now that I'm writing these songs, I want to represent these songs.
Yeah.
And I essentially was looking at the clock thinking like, okay, well, whatever. I'm 26 or I'm 27 and tick-tock.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still not any closer to that brass ring that I'm swimming uphill for, but I want to have both hands on the wheel as opposed to just being in the caboose.
Sure. You want to control your own destiny. Yeah.
That's my thought, you know? And since I had Chris as my so-called, you know, wingman, you know, I just felt like, okay, somebody's got my back. I found my foil.
Mm-hmm.
You dig what I mean? So just like there's Robert Plant and Jimmy Page and there's, you know, Roger Daltrey and Pete Townsend and there's Mick and Keith, there's me and Chris.
Gave you a level of confidence.
A lot.
Yeah.
A substantial amount. Because we had actually started to develop a style, a sound, right?
That was unique to y'all. And
it was unique to, we weren't trying to sound like Cheap Trick. We weren't trying to sound like the Cars. We weren't trying to sound like the Who. We weren't trying to sound like Aerosmith. We weren't trying to sound like Van Halen. But all of that sounded like us.
I see. Yeah, I see.
He was amenable to incorporating elements and things, you know what I'm saying? Because what we were into was having a real broad palette. And at face value, a lot of people would say, well, maybe you just need not to put everything on the pizza. Like AC/DC, it's just good with pepperoni, you know? Yeah, but see, AC/DC is a brand and we know what that is. We're not AC/DC and we're not going to be AC/DC Light or we're not going to be AC/DC
number 2
Mach 3 because people are doing that also.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, we've got a periscope up and we can see what people are doing. And it's always, there's the original and then there's what I call the facsimile and then there's the simulacra, which is like the third version, right? And again, Stephen, I can't overstate how much music is flying at you. Like how much music is just, seems like it's just oozing, it's pouring out everywhere, week by week by week by week. There's another next big thing.
But not only that, you had your antenna open, man. You were looking for it, right? And you were open to it all. And so that certainly contributed to it.
We were bathing in it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's
beautiful.
kind of the point I'm trying to make is, I mean, I'm just telling you the truth. It's like, you know, if I'm hanging with my so-called blues friends, right?
Yeah.
I'm really sure that they're only listening to what they're listening to, for better or for worse, right?
Yeah.
Like Stevie cares about Albert King and he cares about, you know, B.B. King and Freddie King, you know what I'm saying? And Jimi cares about what he cares about, you know what I'm saying? But those guys are not necessarily listening to Ultravox.
Yeah.
Or they really don't care about Peter Gabriel. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they really don't care. I mean, I had conversations, just personal conversations that I won't really divulge, but I had conversations with Stevie about the opportunity that he had to work with David Bowie. And he had some apprehension about it because he had people from blues camp like giving him a lot of negative feedback about that, about selling out, about this, that, and the other thing, about crossing that line into pop music or whatever, right? Like he felt a certain degree, believe it or not, of anxiety about what people thought about that. I know he did because we talked about it. And I'm definitely telling you straight up, I'm the one like, bro, this is an opportunity of a lifetime from where I'm sitting, right?
Yeah,
and it's like, you'd be kind of nuts, like to turn your nose up at it, let alone give a damn about what any of these knuckleheads are saying, because David Bowie's not talking to them. He's talking to you. So I'll just leave that right there. We all know how it worked out, and it worked out for the best.
Yes.
You feel me?
One step at a time. I'm coming down like a slinky. One step at a time, yeah.
So all I'm just saying was that was a big inspiration for me. When I saw Stevie kind of getting an opportunity like that, you know, it seemed so miraculous to me. Because I'm talking about, I've known Stevie. By that time, I've known Stevie for 5 years, you know, and I remember when we literally were just lucky to be eating, let alone, you know, but I also watched him ascend artistically. Like I watched him just flourish from the Cobras to where he first went to the Triple Threat review with WC. Cause I'm not beating my chest about it. I'm just saying I was really in that clique.
You were there. I mean, you're part of it.
We're friends, not just acquaintances.
Sure.
Is what I'm trying to say. You know, see, me and Stevie had bonded behind Jimi Hendrix. You feel me?
That's an easy bond right there.
Well, I'm just saying, you know, Stevie dug me because I was just so into Hendrix.
Yeah.
And you know, I could say it, but I don't want to sound like I'm going over the top, but you know, we were talking about fashions all the time. And so if you could see how Stevie's influence started to escalate.
Ah, I see.
You feel me?
Yeah.
My point was, I'm walking around like that, like all the time. And we had another friend named Keith Ferguson, who was the original bass player of the Fabulous Thunderbirds, who also for a time was flamboyant like that. When I first met Keith Ferguson, he had a long, multi-layered shag with 3 or 4 different colors of hair dye in his hair. He looked like a British glam rock. Yeah, he had just come in from San Francisco.
Okay.
But this was the same Keith that was like Johnny Winter's right-hand man that had gone with Johnny on tour to Europe when Johnny got his big deal and went out and started conquering the world as a rock star. He knew Johnny since like high school. And because Johnny had a vision impairment, Keith was kind of like his right-hand man. We could have a whole nother podcast about Keith. He was a very interesting and eclectic individual. But my point was, Keith and I kind of bonded over that Hendrix style fashion sense. There was only a handful of us, that really understood that presentation. And so I guess where I'm going with this situation is that nobody's just a monolith, right? Like if you talk to enough people, you'll realize that at a certain point in time, like when I met Jimmy Vaughan, he had long straight hair below his belt, like really long straight hair, like the king of the hippies.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Awesome.
But by then he was already resigned to this really kind of what I call subdued, really tense, authentic Chicago blues approach, where everybody else was really trying to get more experimental and more. And then I didn't realize it until later. People told me that, and I don't think I'm talking out of school, people told me that, you know, when he was 15 and 16, he used to play a lot more like Stevie played, like really over the top.
Aggressive, fast,
loud,
in your face. Yep.
Yeah, loud, but very, you know, a lot of feedback and the whole, like, because the Hendrix and the Jeff Beck type thing.
Gotcha.
And I told you, Hendrix and Jeff Beck were like 2 big influences on everybody in Texas.
Right.
All these Texas guitar players and Peter Green from Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm just saying, like, put it in context. I mean, when Jimi was 16, he opened for the Jimi Hendrix Experience in Fort Worth. And he opened for people like The Doors and Steppenwolf. You know, so he was in it when that was the new wave and it was happening.
Mm-hmm.
He was just 15 or 16 and feeling it because everybody else in his band was like 19, 20, 21 or whatever. He was the youngest person in his band because he was like a prodigy. He was already living alone. He already had his own apartment when he was like 16. He was expatriated. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
And I'm only saying that to say you can't judge a book by the cover.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what I'm trying to,
I got you.
That's the underpinning I'm trying to give you. So you see Jimi, I've been hearing all this stuff about Jimi Vaughan. I'm watching Jimi Vaughan, and he's kind of he's playing well, but he's playing a style that's kind of like, you know, Freddie King. It seems just kind of understated. It seems kind of what I call reserved.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? In contrast to other things that are
that
going
was happening
on.
sonically.
You know what I mean? I'm going like, at face value, I'm going like, well, I don't see what the big deal is, you know?
Right.
In contrast to all these.
Yeah, but everything else you were into as well at the time.
But then over time, right, then I started to really appreciate how he had found this niche for himself, like predicated on like what was pure, which he still does to this very
To
day.
this day, yep.
And he just went down that path knowing that he wouldn't deviate too far from authenticity, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And that's literally his calling card, is everybody knows that he can play all these different things. He could quote B.B. King chapter and verse. He could quote Freddie King chapter and verse. He could quote Albert Collins chapter and verse. Like every discipline of the blues, he's got an encyclopedic knowledge of. But the way he distills it in his own expression is pure.
It's a great way to put it, pure.
Right? So you got to love that.
Yes.
But the other side of that coin was when Stevie first started getting into like, you know, Voodoo Child and all of those histrionics,
Mm-hmm.
there was a certain sector that was kind of, you know, frowning on that. You know, like, yo, bro, you know, there's already Jimi Hendrix. You know, what do you think you're trying to do? You know, you think you're going to out Jimi?
Yeah.
You know, you're just like, that's never going to happen, you know? Had he not gone down that path, he wouldn't have found his true expression. Because it's all about influences. And it's just like fashion. Fashion is harmless unless you don't try it out, right? It's like, what type of person goes into a boutique, you know, with a dozen varieties of clothes and what I call fabrics and textures, right? How do you know you don't like leather pants if you never tried a pair of leather pants on?
Fair point.
How do you know that you don't like, suede shoes if you never tried on a pair of suede shoes? Nobody died from trying on a pair of pants.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that was Stevie musically.
Yeah. And of course, that was me my whole life.
Yeah.
It's like, just see what happens,
Mm-hmm.
you know, see how you like it. You know what I'm saying? It's not a situation that you break it, you bought it. You know what I mean? You got nothing to lose.
Right.
So musically, that's the way I always looked at music. It's like, how do I know
Right.
if I don't try to play a Frank Zappa piece of music just because it's technically over my head? How do I know that it's over my head until I try to play it?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that. Well, as a guitarist, I feel that too, because there's plenty of things that I hear and I'm just like, you know, I don't know if I'll ever get around that. And then you break through that barrier and like you said, and it's not a whether of technicality if you can handle it or not.
Well, I just don't like closed-minded people in general. I just find that just to be so boring, you know, like people that just stand on a position predicated on their fear or paranoia doesn't make any sense to me. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because all I'm saying is I bought records just because I liked the album cover. It was nice if the music was good, but I kept the album because I liked the album cover.
From an aesthetic standpoint. Thanks for listening. Know someone we should talk to? Give us a shout on Instagram at Austin Music People. Tell your friends, tell your family, get out there and support Austin music.